Testimony, Kelly. Let's talk about who's on the stand right now. Kerry Morgan, a longtime, really childhood almost friend of Cassie Ventura, and now no longer her friend. What can you tell us about that testimony and how it's starting out?
Interesting start to her testimony, Julia, because she got on the stand. So she met Cassie when they were 15. Cassie was 15. She was 16. They began modeling with one another. She talked about her confidence, how Cassie was very confident and proud and had a spark. But eventually she lost that, she said, when she began to date Sean Combs. One of the things that was interesting right out of the gate is the federal prosecutor was asking her if she wanted to be there to provide testimony. She said, no. Why are you here? Because I was subpoenaed. Really, why don't you really talk to Cassie anymore? Because she asked if she still talked to Cassie. She said, no, we haven't spoken since 2018. And the reason why, she said, because I moved on with my life and I finally was able to get away from them and their problems. So this witness has not yet testified about an assault that took place on her from Sean Combs. So what she is going to be testifying to eventually is she's going to talk about being assaulted by Sean Combs with a hanger. We're not there yet, but what she has testified to so far are 2 incidents of domestic abuse she said she witnessed between Sean Combs and Cassie, in which Sean Combs was dragging Cassie by the hair. He would punch her, hit her. She talked about 2 times, one in Los Angeles as well as in Jamaica, and a time when she had to, as well as Cassie, had to leave the house in LA, go hide. They laid down on the concrete by some steps, waiting for the situation to calm down. So another witness who is describing the situation, the volatile situation between Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura. She also testified to her talking to a security guard for Sean Combs, Ruben is his name, and saying to Ruben, basically, you should do something about this, indicating that you should do something about this violence we're watching between Sean Combs and how he's beating Cassie. And he basically indicated to her, according to his testimony, I'm not going to do anything about it.
The day begins with a charged hush outside the courthouse, cameras clicking in rapid bursts as reporters line the steps. Inside, fluorescent hallway lights hum above polished marble and the low murmur of legal teams shuffling binders. In that air thick with anticipation, 2 witnesses, Kerry Morgan and David James, prepared to speak, each promising to pull back the velvet rope on the superstar's private universe. Their combined narratives will span late-night calls, luxury trips, whispered fears, and a hammer-pounding confrontation at a locked apartment door. For the jury, Kerry Morgan is not a distant observer. She is Cassie Ventura's closest confidant, the friend who shared subway rides to casting calls long before spotlights found them. She and Cassie met while waiting for instant camera Polaroids to develop at a boutique agency in Manhattan nearly 2 decades ago. Those slices of film faded, but the friendship did not. Years later, they split rent on a loft in the Flatiron District, squealing when Cassie signed her first recording contract, and toasting store-brand sparkling water when her single charted. When Cassie started dating Diddy in 2007, Kerry was there, smiling on the living room couch as bouquets and gift boxes flooded in. Kerry recalls the early phase as glam shot magic. There were dazzling tour buses, rooftop brunches overlooking Biscayne Bay, and sudden flights to Ibiza for weekend DJ sets that blurred into Monday mornings. At first, she thought the intensity was part of the music industry whirlwind. Private jets, yacht decks, and backstage wristbands felt like surreal perks, especially for 2 women who had once shared a single hairdryer in a Brooklyn sublet. But somewhere between the midnight confetti cannons and the sunrise after-parties, Kerry sensed a subtle shift in tone, a possessiveness that clung to every phone call Diddy made to Cassie's cell. She testifies that Diddy routinely offered party substances whenever the entourage traveled. Glossy vials and rainbow capsules appeared as casually as bottled water. Kerry notes that Cassie often said no, sipping sparkling juice instead, while Diddy joined his friends in sampling the treats. Kerry herself tried to stay alert. Someone, she thought, needed to keep a clear head. Still, she could not miss how easily those substances greased the gears of long nights and longer mornings. Phone records, Kerry claims, could never capture the sheer relentlessness of Diddy's calls when Cassie slipped from view. 50 rings in a row, sometimes more. First Diddy's number, then a second phone registered under an assistant's name. Then mutual friends, Christina, nicknamed CK, or longtime staffer, KK, each dialed in rapid succession, asking if Kerry had eyes on Cassie. She describes the barrage as a sonic wall she could not ignore. The ringtone felt like an alarm that wouldn't shut off until Cassie answered.
These testimonies are going to be extremely important. Building a case against someone as high profile as Diddy is not an easy job. So I'm going to bring in former FBI agent Bobby Chacon to talk more about this. So off the bat, Bobby, how do you build a case against a celebrity as well-resourced and powerful as Diddy?
Well, it takes a lot, Sylvia, as you know, because the allegations in this case range from like 2004 to 2024. So this is going to be going on for 20 years, and they're finally getting around to charging him now and trying now. That's because it's so difficult to get people who are not afraid to come forward. This person was powerful, they were rich, they had a lot of influence, they were allegedly violent. So all of those things add up to making it very difficult for investigators to get people to talk to them about these. You add in the fact that many of these things are embarrassing. They're of a sexual nature. They're private. They take place behind closed doors, and that adds to the reticence of witnesses coming forward and talking about these things. And so investigators have to do a lot of long, hard work in getting these witnesses to trust them. Number one. To make sure they feel like they are being treated, not as a pawn in a game to get Diddy, but as people that really care, that the prosecution cares about these people. And so you bring in victim witness people who are trained really and have the background in talking to people who are maybe victims of alleged sexual violence. And so you bring in specialists that kind of can talk to people like that, and get them to open up about these things and to trust the investigators and trust the prosecutors, that they're just not going to be thrust into a situation. You have to get them to trust you so that if someone does make a threat, even if it's veiled, people can do that on social media now. They can say things that are kind of a little bit wonky sometimes, or these veiled threats. So if the witnesses that you're developing are comfortable enough with you, they will bring those threats to you, or those situations where they might feel threatened. You always have, on the federal level, we have the Witness Protection Program, right, which is run by the U.S. Marshal Service. That's kind of a very extreme step, because that's somebody you change their identity, you move them to another part of the country. They're not allowed any contact with previous people in their lives. So it's the Witness Protection Program is one of the more extreme steps that you take. But there are other steps you can take to ensure the witness that they're not going to be subject to that. If anyone does make a statement that's even considered something like that, you send a team to go out and investigate and to question that person and to get them to maybe make a retraction or to kind of back off a little bit. So you do have to do a good job at making sure the witnesses are comfortable that if anything should happen that they feel uncomfortable about, they bring it to you, and then you have to address it in the ways that are available to you.
On a balmy summer evening in the Hollywood Hills, Kerry says the tension detonated. A gathering meant to celebrate the launch of a new single turned sour without warning. Music thumped through outdoor speakers while Los Angeles glittered beyond glass railings. Kerry, heading back inside for a jacket, stopped short as she heard a muffled shout. She turned the corner and saw Diddy, face taut, deliver a kick to Cassie's shin. Behind him stood a security guard named Ruben, broad-shouldered, earpiece glowing, who stared but did nothing. Kerry shouted Ruben's name, begging him to intervene. He shook his head once, almost imperceptibly. Kerry grabbed Cassie's hand, and together they fled through a side gate, huddling behind an unfamiliar porch until dawn's first light painted the street. According to Kerry, that night marked the death of Cassie's sparkling confidence. The singer, once quick to laugh, now measured every word, scanning rooms before speaking. Kerry watched her friend's body language shrink, shoulders curled, gaze lowered, voice hushed whenever Diddy's name appeared on a phone screen. Cassie's text replies grew shorter, punctuated by ellipses, as though she feared writing the wrong thing. Producers waiting for vocal takes received polite delays. Choreographers rescheduled video rehearsals. Kerry remembers thinking, success was supposed to make her soar, not clip her wings. Months later, a sun-drenched getaway to Jamaica, advertised to friends as a reset holiday, spiraled into chaos. Kerry narrates how a late afternoon argument about undisclosed jealousy escalated inside a lavish villa with a 50-yard marble corridor. She says Diddy seized Cassie by the hair and dragged her the length of that hallway, harsh footsteps echoing against stone. Cassie broke free and dashed out a side door into dense foliage. Carrie ran the opposite direction to retrieve her purse and phone, determined to help her friend escape. Outside, 2 golf carts idled in the driveway. Carrie jumped into the first, Diddy climbed into the second. They sped off in different directions beneath palm fronds quivering in the evening breeze. Carrie located Cassie crouched among ferns, tears mixing with humidity. Together they concealed themselves in a roadside ditch, whispering breathless reassurances while twilight crickets chirped a nervous soundtrack. Fear, Carrie testifies, lingers longer than bruises. Even after leaving Jamaica, she would bolt awake at random hotel layovers, certain she heard pounding footsteps in the hallway. Cassie began double-locking doors, checking windows twice, and memorizing emergency exits in every venue. When friends asked how the tropical holiday went, Cassie forced a smile or changed the subject. Trust, Carrie realized, had become a luxury item they could no longer afford. Back in New York, the pattern reached its apex at Cassie's apartment on Comstock Street. One rainy night, Carrie recounts, Diddy arrived unannounced and attempted to force his way inside, swinging a hammer against the solid wood door. Cassie, hoodie pulled low, braced herself on the opposite side while Carrie dialed the police. Officers appeared, assessed a noise disturbance, and knocked. Cassie, fearful and exhausted, refused to show identification or file a statement, so the officers left a detective's business card. Carrie later photographed that plain white card, its phone number smudged by raindrops as a grim souvenir of help that never fully arrived. The conflict did not stop at Cassie's doorstep. Carrie tells the jury that Diddy once swung a wooden coat hanger at her own head, striking just behind the right ear before pressing his hand to her throat in a brief choke. He demanded to know who Cassie was supposedly cheating with. Carrie recalls his breath hot with anger, eyes fixed in accusation. She escaped, sought urgent care for a tender scalp, and ultimately accepted a monetary settlement funded by Diddy. To this day, she says, a faint tenderness behind her ear reminds her of that moment.
Man, what drama inside that courtroom. Kelly Craft should be back next hour with another update. Kelly, thank you. Let's get back into the federal courthouse there. Alan Kagawa is watching along with us. He's in the San Francisco Bay Area, up in Martinez in the East Bay. Alan, this is your life scenario for Sean Combs. A lot of defendants go through it. But is this sex trafficking? Is this human trafficking, which is the root of the charges against him by the federal government? It's obvious abuse and it's horrific behavior. Is the government proving their case?
You're right here that there's obvious abuse. There's a lot of absolutely terrible domestic violence, and it's clear that there's a bad temper. But at this point, I'm not fully convinced that sex trafficking has been established. There's a couple ways to essentially try to force people to do things. One is by force, but another one is essentially what's known as a bit of a psychological coercion. Basically, someone feels trapped. What I'm getting here is like there were aspects of force. I'm getting that the government may be trying to establish psychological coercion as well. As of this point, I'm not fully sure if the government has shown sex trafficking. Definitely domestic violence, but I'll have to listen for more.
And that's what the defense argues in this case, that yes, this was domestic violence, but this was not sex trafficking, Alan. Let's talk about Kerry Morgan on the stand. She's someone who separated herself from Cassie and from Sean Combs. Her being a former friend, someone who hasn't even spoken to Cassie Ventura in all of these years, how much does that help the credibility of her testimony in front of this jury?
That certainly helps her credibility. The fact that they are not, close friends, have talked recently, shows potentially a lack of bias. Oftentimes jurors will consider the testimony of someone who's a close friend or family member or someone that they've seen right recently as having, a bit of a desire to help the person. Here, the fact that they haven't really talked in 3 years helps her credibility.
18 years of friendship unraveled in the aftermath. Carrie and Cassie last spoke in 2018. Defense attorneys seize on this silence, suggesting Carrie might harbor resentment. Why no hospital records? Why no photographs of bruises? Had Carrie herself indulged in party substances, clouding her memory? They spotlight a moment when Cassie chatted amicably with actor Michael B. Jordan, provoking a jealous flare in Diddy. Carrie concedes the chat happened. She says jealousy flickered in Diddy's eyes that evening like a struck match. Prosecutors redirect, steering the narrative back to Jamaica to the 50-yard hallway that still echoes in Carrie's mind. Court resumes after lunch, and David James steps forward. He introduces himself as Diddy's personal assistant from 2007 through 2009, a Michigan college grad who faxed a resume to Bad Boy Records on a whim. The hiring test, he says, included memorizing 40 appointments in 30 minutes and knowing the exact airtime of a Hot 97 show. He embraced the challenge, quoting Diddy's own mantra, "Can't stop, won't stop," and landed the job. David describes 20-hour workdays that began at corporate offices on Broadway, pivoted to Michelin star dinners, continued in recording studios until 3 a.m., and ended only when Diddy himself called a next-day meet time. Security guards, names like D-Rock, Bonds, and Uncle Paulie, pulled him aside early and advised, "Stay in your lane." Those words, David says, became his code for survival in an ecosystem where boundaries shifted with Diddy's moods. Star Island, Miami. Pool lights shimmer on turquoise water. Cassie sits at a patio table, voice barely above the rustle of palm leaves. She confides to David that Diddy controls her life, her music, even the apartment lease under her name. She fears releasing songs without his blessing, an album she poured heart into lies in limbo unreleased. David listens, feeling helpless. Later, David overhears Diddy boasting to staff that Kim Porter remains his queen in Los Angeles, while Cassie is young and moldable in New York. He delivers the quote with measured calm, but the jury's pens scratch paper in unison, and a ripple passes through the gallery. Prosecutors nod subtly, their narrative of control bolstered by the assistant's inside ear. The judge eventually taps the gavel, bringing proceedings to a close for the day. Court adjourns amid subdued chatter. Reporters rush to file updates. Spectators debate credibility in hushed elevators. Some believe Carrie and David just supplied the prosecution with silver bullets. Others predict the defense will dismantle every anecdote, pointing to lack of medical paperwork and years-old memories. Outside, cameras await reactions. Commentators frame the testimonies as bombshells, though they caution that trials are marathons, not sprints. Social feeds ignite, hashtags trend, armchair analysts dissect body language, and fans scroll fervently for fresh clips. Yet behind the noise, one reality persists. The jury, bound by oaths, will weigh evidence slowly, away from the glare. In the meantime, the public appetite for answers only grows. Viewers wonder if future witnesses will corroborate or contradict. Will emails emerge? Will security footage surface? How will Diddy's legal team counter this narrative of domination and fear? Each day's testimony feels like a new puzzle piece, its edges sharp, its picture still incomplete. As night settles over the city, we reflect on the human cost woven through superstar headlines. Friendships fractured, careers stalled, trust eroded by obsession. Cassie's once glittering ascent pauses in suspended animation. Carrie's loyalty has cost her peace. David's resume now carries the weight of what he heard behind gold-plated doors. The legal system will render its verdict, but the emotional reckoning has already begun. We return tomorrow with more courtroom revelations. Will David James endure a bruising cross-examination? Will another former insider step forward? Be sure to subscribe, ring the notification bell, and join the conversation in the comments below. Your voice matters in unraveling the truth behind the tabloid roar. Until then, stay curious, stay respectful, and remember, allegations are statements, not convictions. Justice, like daylight, arrives in measured increments, sometimes slowly, always inevitably.